Hey, how's it going? I'm Josh from 91 Tech, and today we're going to be taking a look at the iPhone 6 and iPhone 6 Plus. Are they worth buying 3 years after release? As you probably know, the iPhone 6 was released in late 2014 and came in 2 iterations, the iPhone 6 and the iPhone 6 Plus. For the first time ever, Apple finally stepped into the big phone screen market. This was something that Samsung was really gaining traction with, so the iPhone 6 was definitely a good marketing choice for Apple at the time. So since this video is mostly focused on whether or not you should buy it, we're going to go pretty quickly through a lot of the specifications on this phone. So the smaller iPhone 6 comes with a 4.7-inch screen and a resolution of 750 by 1334. The pixel density is the same as the iPhone 6 Plus with 326 pixels per inch. So what I'll say about this phone screen is that it's quite good. You'll be able to see everything very cleanly and crisply, and you're not going to really have too many complaints. Yes, it's not as good as an OLED panel on, say, a Samsung phone, probably from this era, but even so, it works, it does the job, and I really have no complaints with it. In fact, it's the same panel you'll find on the iPhone 8, minus a few nice things like brighter screen, True Tone display, but for the most part the quality is going to be pretty much the same. The iPhone 6 Plus is a little bit bigger with a 5.5-inch screen and a resolution of 1920 by 1080. So while it has a higher resolution, as said before, it does have the same pixel density with 326 pixels per inch. So essentially they're going to look pretty much the same when it comes to quality. So which phone you prefer is really up to you. If you're on a budget, I'm going to obviously recommend the smaller one because it's going to be cheaper, but if you really like that big display, then maybe the Plus is, a good idea. I will say the smaller one is probably better if you like to use your phone with one hand. If you have relatively small hands like me, then you're definitely not going to want to get the Plus model. It's just too darn big. So moving on from that, let's talk about the design because it looks really good and kind of set the trend that Apple's continued for a few years now. So the iPhone 6 features an all aluminum backing with those plastic antenna bands that I don't really like, but for the most part it looks pretty good, and it's also super light and super thin. It's thinner than the iPhone 6s, the iPhone 7, iPhone 8, iPhone 10, etc. This is, I think, the thinnest phone Apple's ever made. That isn't actually a good thing for this phone, and the reason is because of durability. So as you probably remember Bendgate, these phones are prone to, well, bending. They weren't built with the strongest aluminum Apple could have used, and if you're going to use one of these, first off, when you're buying them, make sure it doesn't look bent. Bending can cause problems down the road, although oftentimes phones will be fairly functional. And if you're going to use them, either put it in a case or make sure you're not wearing super tight pants and sitting down a lot or anything like that, because that's usually how it gets bent. A case is probably the easiest solution, and really that goes for any phone anyway, so it's not a huge deal, just be careful. The iPhone 6s did fix this if you're a little worried about that durability issue, but for the iPhone 6, bending is a problem. So overall, it feels very nice to hold, very nice to use, and it still looks like a 2017 smartphone because that design is frankly very similar to what we see today with the iPhone 8. So the phone does have a headphone jack, which is always a nice feature and kind of rare nowadays. So if you are into the headphone jack, then you're covered here. It is not at all water resistant, so if you get the iPhone 6, make sure you do not drop it in the toilet because you could pretty easily kill it. So let's talk about the camera, because the camera is always a big part of a smartphone, and frankly, it's not amazing. It's decent, but not great anymore considering what we see now. Now, obviously, in relation to the iPhone 8 or iPhone 10, it's going to not look that good, but considering most people's needs for cameras, it's going to be absolutely fine. It has 8 megapixels on the rear-facing camera, and it shoots 1080p videos, so it's not too bad. It can shoot up to 60 frames per second as well in 1080p, which is nice. If you want to see a full video camera test I did quite a while back, the link will be in the description below. Honestly, I was a little underwhelmed by the performance in that video, but to be fair, it was a very low light situation, so things didn't look great. But again, it wasn't terrible, and I'd imagine you could probably get a little bit better quality if you turn it down to 30 frames per second instead of 60 for 1080p. And you're going to get some good shots, you're also going to get some bad shots. That's just kind of how it works. But when it comes to having a really good camera, if you really need one, I'd recommend either going up to the iPhone 6s or iPhone SE, as they're both quite a bit better than the iPhone 6. The front-facing, or selfie camera you might call it, on the iPhone 6 is pretty bad with only 1.2 megapixels and the ability to shoot 720p. It's not very good, but if you're, just using it for FaceTime or Skype or whatever, you're probably okay. But if you're really into taking pictures of yourself and posting to Instagram or whatever, your quality is not going to be there. So in that case, you might want to opt for a 6S or better. So that's the camera. It's nothing great, but it will do the job if you just need to take some photos. The iPhone 6 holds Apple's A8 chipset, and it's decently fast. It has 1 GB of RAM, which is probably the biggest problem with this phone, because it's having a little bit of trouble now keeping up with iOS 11. On iOS 10, it was still pretty decent, but iOS 11, I would say, is giving it quite a few issues and stutters, and it's not as good as it used to be. When it comes down to it, for normal average use, it will be fine, but honestly, it's not going to be an amazing fluid experience, and you know, that's just something that happens with old phones like this. Now, on the bright side, it is supported for iOS 11, and it will also be getting iOS 12 next year, pretty much guaranteed to get that. And then after that, it'll probably be stuck on iOS 12. I highly doubt it will get iOS 13, looking, you know, quite a bit ahead here. That's just based off of Apple's recent patterns they've made with updating phones. So we'll get a little bit more into that in a few minutes here, but let's talk about that battery, because it's actually not terrible. It's 1,810 milliamp hours, which isn't great, but it should get you through the day with moderate to mostly moderate use. If you're using it a lot, especially with YouTube or games, you are going to probably need to charge it, but if you're, you know, just using it once in a while throughout the day like most people, then you're probably fine. You definitely are going to need to charge it every night, but that pretty much goes for any phone right now. So yeah, I wouldn't worry too much about the battery. Just keep in mind that used phones, because you're probably going to have to buy the iPhone 6 used phones do vary when it comes to battery life, so you might get one with a battery that's been really run down and it's going to be depleted compared to, say, a brand new one. So that's something that happens, just keep that in mind. The storage iterations for the iPhone 6 come in 16, 32, 64, or 128 gigabytes. I would always recommend not going for the 16 gigabyte because, frankly, it's usually just not enough space, especially if you're filming a lot or, you know, taking a lot of nice pictures. But if you're on a budget, 16 gigabytes will do you fine because, frankly, it's cheaper. The iPhone 6 does have Touch ID and Apple Pay, so that's pretty nice. In fact, this was the phone that introduced Apple Pay, so interesting fact there. It comes in the colors Space Gray, Gold, or Silver, so you have a little bit of variety there. I've always liked the Space Gray because it has those black bezels, but when I had an iPhone 6, it was actually silver. So that's basically the iPhone 6 when it comes to pure specs, but that doesn't really tell us a lot about actually using it now. Frankly, it's not a horrible experience, but it's not a great one either. If you're not somebody who uses their phone a ton, you're probably going to be just fine with the iPhone 6, but if you're a bit of a power user, then you're definitely going to want to bump it up to either the 6S or the SE. When it comes to pricing, you can find them probably for around $200 on eBay.com without too much issue. However, for that price, you could probably find a used SE, so I wouldn't actually recommend buying the iPhone 6. Yes, it's usable. Yes, it's going to be supported for like another 2 years. Yes, it can do pretty much everything a newer phone can, but when it comes down to it, the experience already is not great. Next year, it's going to be probably even worse with the release of iOS 12. If you're looking for a phone to have for a long time, I would not recommend the iPhone 6. I would say go up to the 6S or the SE. If you don't need the bigger screen, maybe you're coming from a 5S or an iPhone 5, I would totally recommend the iPhone SE because frankly, it's really good and it's really cheap. It's about the same price as the iPhone 6, but it has the same internals as the iPhone 6S, which makes it a lot faster and frankly a lot better. It also has the same camera as the 6S, which really helps things. If you do need that big screen, then an iPhone 6 might not be a bad choice, as it's probably the cheapest option with a big screen. So yes, this thing is still worth buying for the price, but I do think there are better options, and maybe I'll do a video on that later. I'm not quite sure yet, but at the moment I would say yes, it is worth buying if this is what you're looking for. But if you're looking for a phone that'll last you a long time, I would buff it up to an iPhone SE or possibly an extra $100 for a 6S. So that's pretty much all I have to say on the iPhone 6. Do you agree with me? Disagree with me? Let me know down in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it, and this was kind of a fun video to do. It's probably took me way too long, believe it or not, even if it doesn't seem like it. So yeah, make sure you like this video if it helped you or you found it interesting, and please consider subscribing if tech is your thing. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Josh from 91 Tech, and I will see you all next time.